Joining us right now on the Daily Dose, we have a guy that I'm telling you, he is an absolute encyclopedia of sports information, and specifically for the state of California. Dan Cisco is an author that wrote a book called California Sports Astounding, Fun, Unknown, and Surprising Facts from Statehood to Sunday. I'm telling you, this book covers an absolute ton of sports facts and stories from the Golden State of California. Dan is also known as the California sports guy. He is a sports researcher with over 25 years of experience. He's a lifelong sports fan. His sports history expertise has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC. Dan, I'm very excited to have you join us today. Welcome to the Daily Dose.
Hey, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Dan, there is so much that I want to get into today with you. You have so much sports knowledge, but before all of that, where did you grow up? Where is your background kind of from?
Well, born and raised in San Diego, and lifelong sports fan, a frustrated athlete, as it were. But I ran cross country and track and field, so I enjoyed that in high school and college. But I was always a big sports fan, reading Jim Murray and the Los Angeles Times, listening to Vince Scully, with Dodger baseball,
the best.
You name it, just a little bit of everything.
So what teams did you grow up kind of cheering for? Was it just San Diego based teams, or did you kind of, head up that coast a little bit?
Well, I really enjoyed the Chargers, the San Diego Chargers, when they played back in Balboa Stadium, which is close to downtown San Diego. And those were the days of the American Football League, and each game was 48-45.
Yes.
And, that kind of excitement. So I followed them, San Diego Padres, when they were a minor league team in the Pacific Coast League, way back when. The Dodgers, just teams actually all throughout the country. I just enjoyed reading a lot and learning about all these people. But California's got it all, you have to admit.
No, you're exactly right. They have so many teams and so many great athletes have come out of that state. Speaking of great athletes, who are the athletes that you were watching as a kid going, that's the guy? That's the athlete right there that I want to try to copy. I want to try to mimic. Who are the athletes that you were really, really watching?
Well, Sandy Koufax with the Dodgers.
Oh yeah.
We all understood how he would win, 20 games in a season, but we never understood how he could lose 2 or 3 games. He was just so far ahead of his time. Yeah. He was just an amazing athlete, and really exciting to watch them go at it with the Giants. Oh my God, Willie Mays and the Giants, and the Giants back then had the 3 M's, right?
Yeah,
Mays, Willie McCovey, and Juan Marichal. They had 3 all-stars, and they'd go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers, and each game would be 2-1 or 1-0, so a lot of good times.
What are the teams that you follow now? We talked a little bit before we started recording. San Diego, everybody's leaving. You've lost your Chargers. Obviously, you've lost the Clippers years ago. You've lost a few teams. Who are the teams you follow now, or are you just kind of a sports fan in general?
Actually, I follow sports on even a national basis. I'm just basically a fan of what's in season. I enjoy it all. Hockey, if hockey and basketball ends, like right now, okay, no big deal. We've got baseball as a spotlight for about another month, and then football season will be here before you know it. So really, I just like the variety of it all, and college, pro, a little bit of everything.
I can absolutely appreciate that. It's interesting because your book is so full of incredible stories, a lot of information. Here in Colorado, I coached some high school basketball, and I know from that, some of our small towns, we've got some really, really unique mascots here in Colorado. We've got the brush beet diggers for the sugar beet population that's out there. We've got the Alamosa mean moose. We've got the Rocky Ford Meloneers because they grow melons down in Rocky Ford. I know in your book, you've got some really interesting mascots out in California. Can you speak to a few of those?
Yeah, there's a few, more than a few. One of the favorites, even ESPN called it the best college mascot ever was the University of California, Santa Cruz.
Sure.
You know, the banana slugs.
Gets no better.
So we had the banana slugs, and you know, they made news. They were probably the most exciting to follow. And if you go south to Irvine, California, University of California has the UC Irvine Anteaters.
Nothing like a good anteater.
Hard to pick. If you got anteater or banana slug, I don't know.
You can't lose either way, though, can you? Those are both great names.
You can't.
Speaking of kind of, you know, college and some of the things going on collegiately, you're a California guy, you're out on the West Coast. How are you feeling about these changes that are taking place with the Pac-12, USC and UCLA leaving for the Big Ten? I know you remember back in those Pac-8 days. I remember those as well. It's kind of painful to watch this all go away. I understand the money involved, but there's a lot of tradition and a lot of rivalry history that is getting lost in all this shuffling, isn't there?
Yeah, it's you know, the money involved with the TV networks is so great at this point.
Yeah.
Each school is just looking to survive. I mean, you know, UC Berkeley has a challenging, you know, a budget to work with right now. UCLA was losing a lot of money. So they're all just doing the best that they can to get into a stable environment. Yep. I think you're going to see a lot of shakeout with teams from the Mountain West possibly moving into the Pac-10 or 12 to stabilize that conference. One example might be San Diego State, which has a brand new football stadium opening up in September.
Right. Yeah.
They could fill that vacancy in the Southern California TV market that's being vacated by UCLA and USC.
You have to hope, because losing that conference, I know that in the last few years, it hasn't been what it used to be, but we remember those days. We remember those Rose Bowls. It was one of the biggest conferences in the country. I really hope they're going to figure this out and they're going to kind of bolster this and get this going again.
Yeah, well, hopefully if they can stabilize the conference and keep these remaining members there and add a few more, maybe that'll be just enough of what they need to move forward. Yeah. Otherwise, they might be poached by the Big 12 or further by the Big 10 or even SEC. And if that's the case, if they lose 3 or 4 more, then yeah, the conference might be on life support. But I think, well, it's going to be interesting. We'll just have to see. San Diego is probably the 6th or 7th largest city in America right now. 6th, 7th, 8th. It's definitely in the top 10 population-wise.
Right.
And we're the largest city in America that's not in a Power 5 conference.
Yeah.
Well, in the Mountain West, that's a group of 5, right? So
right.
We'll just have to see what's going to happen there. And that's going to, of course, affect all the other sports. You know, we're losing, well, UCLA and USC had so many great Olympic athletes.
Right.
You know, all those sports. They're probably happy that they're going to go to the Big Ten and get a few more dollars.
Well, and you bring up a really good point, because it's not just football. It's not just basketball. We know the Pac-12 track is a really, really important part of that conference, and they have had some amazing athletes through their history.
Yeah, exactly. They've won, the Pac-12 has won more NCAA championships than any other conference by far.
Right.
And with Stanford, USC, and UCLA leading the way. But the Olympic sports, certainly, I mean, we've had a lot of great track meets, even in San Diego, and the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, Berkeley, places like that.
Well, and it's interesting to me because in your book, you even kind of talk about there's a few colleges in California. People might not realize just how many titles that they have won.
Exactly. Because we're California being so big, and we have schools that are in the NCAA and then the NAIA. We have the largest community college system in the world. You've got great athletes that came out of community college. I mean, Jackie Robinson was at Pasadena College. That's a great example right there.
Yeah, no, you've had some amazing ones. You also speak in your book about a guy that, at least to me, because I'm a big NFL guy, I love college football, I love the NFL, but we lost John Madden this past year. And he is one of the most important figures to me in the history of the NFL. But people might not realize that he was a California guy through and through, wasn't he?
Yeah, yes, he was. And he coached all throughout the state. And at one point, he came down to San Diego and worked as an assistant for Don Coryell when Don Coryell's San Diego State Aztecs were tearing up the college scene.
Yeah.
And that was a good training ground.
Sure.
And can you imagine having him on the staff? Oh my God. So two heads were definitely a terrific duo there.
Well, and what an incredible coaching staff that had to have been. They ended up coaching, against each other. In fact, we remember one of the crazy games that was, in Raiders and Chargers history back in '78, the Holy Roller. I know that was a game that you had to be dying on, but what an amazing game. It changed the NFL. They literally had to change the rules for the Holy Roller.
They did after that forced fumble at the end of the game when the Raiders were being tackled and they fumbled the ball and kicked it and pounced on it and somehow came up with it. And at that point, the NFL said, okay, great entertainment, great TV ratings, but next year we have new rules for all this. You can't do this anymore. But it was a great story. It was a great story, definitely.
It is
Raiders
a great story.
And the Chargers were just perfect for each other as a rivalry.
You're absolutely right. And they kind of were almost opposites. You had the Raiders willing to kind of do anything and maybe push the rules. You had the Chargers, especially those late 70s, early 80 Chargers. How fun were they to watch? I watched them as a Bronco fan, and I'm just going, oh my goodness, this is a track meet. I just hope we can keep up.
You couldn't stop the Don Coryell offense.
No.
He left San Diego State, and he was hired by the San Diego Chargers, and then he had all these great players. Dan Fouts quarterbacking and throwing to Charlie Joyner and Kellen Winslow and all these people. But yeah, those were exciting games. They were a continuation of the American Football League.
You're right.
Type of game that was just wild and crazy and great entertainment for everybody. Yeah.
We have gone through so many years and so many games and so many seasons. And there's a ton of games that you can put on as one of the greatest games ever. But if you want to put on a game and be thoroughly entertained, that game between the Miami Dolphins and the San Diego Chargers down in the heat in Miami in the AFC playoff game, that is as good as it gets. And I remember watching it as a little kid and thinking, this is amazing. You go back and watch it now, it still holds up. That's an amazing game.
Yeah, it was fabulous because the Chargers were on the road and they were dehydrated. The humidity was off the charts, and they kept battling and it went to overtime, and just a fantastic game. That was one of the few playoff games that really lived up to the hype and the excitement of it all. A lot of the games now just seem like blowouts, but that was one of the best NFL games ever. You ask serious NFL fans, they'll tell you that's one of the best.
So much fun and performances on both sides of the ball. Just what an incredible game, an incredible finish. They spot them the big lead, they come back, but yeah, just an amazing game. And a game that I know we kind of gloss over him now because you have the Tony Gonzalez's, you have the Rob Gronkowski's. Kellen Winslow was really, really good, wasn't he?
Yeah, he pretty much unstoppable.
Yes.
I mean, he had the height, he had the speed, the strength, great blocker, great pass catcher. Usually it's one or the other.
You're right.
You're a blocker and you can't run a route.
Yeah.
This guy could do it all.
Well, and he kind of gets forgotten now, but don't forget, he went in to block a field goal as well. Like, what couldn't he do? Just an amazing athlete. Those Chargers teams, they were always teams that, like I said, they kind of get forgotten. They did never win the big one, but wow, they were just so entertaining. And of course, we talked a little bit about those teams with the Raiders. Then you go up a little further up you've got the San Francisco 49ers. And, speaking of those Niners, you talk a little bit in the book about the catch back in 1982 when the 49ers beat the Dallas Cowboys. Is there a bigger landscape changer than that game for what was going on in the NFL at that time? It kind of ushered in that Bill Walsh, and we know what a copycat league the NFL is. Now everybody wants to run the Bill Walsh stuff, but he was incredible.
Yeah, that was a terrific game, and you're correct. It was definitely a watershed moment, a changing of eras, and the 49ers battled the Cowboys that whole game.
Yeah.
And here we go right to the end, and then Montana throws up that desperation pass, and I mean, he came within inches of being sacked by 2 or 3 Cowboys. He throws it up. Dwight Clark makes the catch. And what people forget about that game is that after the 49ers had scored and taken the lead, the Cowboys had just enough time. They ran it back. They got to midfield and finally were stopped, but they came very, very close. A few 10 yards or more. They could have kicked a field goal and then that would have ended it. But it was meant to be. You're right. It ushered in a whole new, offensive philosophy, and here we are. So.
Yeah, it really did change everything that was going on, because then everyone wanted to go, well, we want to run some sort of West Coast kind of system. We want to go with the short passes, maybe kind of ease off the running game instead of that 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They went, hey, we're going to spread it out and attack you horizontally as well as vertically, which is what Bill Walsh was so good at doing. Yeah, it was such a huge game. And I remember watching that game as a Bronco fan. I couldn't stand the Cowboys. I hated the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm all in, come on, beat the Dallas Cowboys. They got to go down. So yeah, I was cheering for them. As a California fan, as someone who grew up out there, are you torn on the whole Montana versus Brady thing? How are you feeling about these two quarterbacks? Or personally, I'm in the boat of an era just can't be compared. It's so different. But where do you come in on Montana, Brady, comparing different eras?
Well, I think it's really difficult to compare. I mean, you can have the greatest offensive line in the world, and if you're only sacked a few times in your career, that changes everything. I mean, if you didn't have that support of the line, you can look very ordinary in a hurry. And both quarterbacks were fortunate to have that kind of support. The league is different now. The seasons are longer. Yeah. Really, really hard to pick one over the other. But I have to admit, Montana was very advanced in his college years. I mean, he went from high school and college. He hit it really hard with Notre Dame and was immediately a success. And Brady came along later and was excellent as well. But it's just kind of interesting. Different styles, like you say, different eras. And, we forget the NFL. I mean, seasons were only 12 games long, and now they're much longer. Off season is shorter, it seems. Everything's condensed and kind of crazy, but California keeps cranking them out. I mean, this past college season, we had all the top college quarterbacks were from California. I mean, Bryce Young won the Heisman Trophy, and then the Ohio State quarterback. You had, so you've got and the Clemson quarterback, and it goes on and on and on.
That's right. A ton of them are coming out of California. I always think back, people love to name that greatest quarterback, and he's the guy, and this has to be the guy, and he was better than him. And I always think back to players that I know you watched a lot of. And I think of what would they do in today's game? What would Kenny Stabler or Dan Fouts or even John Hadel, who I know you watched a lot of, it seems to me they would have looked really, really good in this era where you can't touch them or their receivers. I think they would have flourished.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, John Hadel was throwing to the Hall of Fame receiver, Lance Allworth, who could run a 100-yard dash in 9.6 seconds. So I don't know, but nowadays sports medicine and science move so far forward. Athletes are faster, bigger, nutrition's better, equipment's better, everything about it is so advanced. You know, Bill Russell played at University of San Francisco and they won the NCAA title there. And he developed, you know, as a fantastic, you know, Hall of Fame player. But yeah, nowadays, the people that are coming out of high school, junior high school,
Right.
Are just so far advanced. You wonder if there's going to be a limit to some of this human, you know, accomplishment, bringing these world records down in track and field and other sports. What is the limit, or is there a limit?
No, you're right, because it just seems like every time we think there's no way they can get there. No, they go on past. They just plow right through it. There's just some amazing athletes. And like you said, the training keeps getting better. The coaching keeps getting better. We're seeing kids come in and start specializing at the time they're little baby kids. You know, there are a lot of those guys playing in even the early NFL, but obviously the AFL, they were getting summer jobs. They weren't going out and training.
That's right. I mean, Joe DiMaggio, he wasn't spending, you know, his off season. He was working and doing other stuff. But now they train year round. And so, yeah, it's a very different environment.
I know that your book covers so many subjects. You covered every sport. And it was really incredible to look through and just go, oh my goodness. I mean, he's covering golf, he's covering tennis, he's covering track and field, football, basketball, baseball, you name it. I'm going to ask you to be completely, I guess this is going to be unfair to you, but a couple of years ago here at the Daly Dose, we went through every state and we said probably the greatest sports moment for every state, and then maybe the worst sports moment for every state. I know there's a million to choose from. If you were picking that greatest moment in sports history, and I'll be honest, I went with the catch, but who knows? You have seen far more California sports than I have. Is there a moment that you look back at and you go, man, the whole state kind of rallied around that? Because I know North and South California, it kind of different states there. But is there one moment that you think of as the greatest sports moment in California history?
Oh boy, that's an astounding question.
I know I'm asking far too much.
But I could probably pick, at least recently, you know, with the Dodgers. Los Angeles Dodgers playing the Oakland Athletics.
Sure.
In the World Series, and Kirk Gibson comes up injured, can barely hobble out of the training room, hobbles out to home plate and hits that home run to win the game off Dennis Eckersley. I mean, a lot of Dodger fans will tell you that's their all-time greatest memory. And that's, you know, that's overlooking all these World Series champions and everywhere else. But it was kind of interesting because it was Northern California versus Southern California.
Right.
So that dynamic. And Gibson comes out there, hits the home run, wins the game, and then did not play later in the series. That was his only appearance, but it was so powerful. It was so unexpected. And, but that, and oh gosh, I don't know. You know, do you want a worst moment?
Yes, I would love a worst moment.
Oh my,
we'll take them. What do you have?
oh my God. Oh man. Oh, I don't know. California Sports Astounding didn't really drudge up the horrible stuff so much.
We go negative here. We're gonna people have to relive some pain.
Yeah. Oh well, I think it's just
and I'll give you the one that I gave.
Okay.
The end of a dynasty where Texas beats Southern Cal in the Rose Bowl, to me, felt like that stung, because there really was a feeling, I don't know if Southern Cal is ever going to lose again. They're just rolling and rolling and rolling, and Texas coming into the Rose Bowl and beating them. I know that stung a little bit. Are there other? Sure. The 2004 Lakers losing to the Pistons. I know that was an all-star game, or an all-star team that the Lakers had. So maybe, you know, something like that would make the list, but I'm sure you probably have it. And I'll throw other one out there, not from a standpoint of wins and losses, but a standpoint of just horrifying. And I believe it was the 89 World Series with the earthquake game up in San Francisco. I don't know where you were when that took place, but I know from a sports fan perspective, that was truly scary stuff.
Yeah, that was a big deal. And, you know, of course, it was on national TV and everything else with all the coverage. And that was a very unique World Series. Definitely, that was a low point. I can remember one World Series going back to 1963 with Sandy Koufax and the Dodgers, but the Yankees, New York Yankees, swept them in 4 games. And that's a really bad feeling when you get that far. Sure. And you're really a great team. And then you go up against Whitey Ford and all those Yankees, and to lose in that manner was really rough.
Yeah.
Here's another one I'll just throw out just for fun. In football, the USC Trojans playing Notre Dame and losing to Notre Dame 51-0. And then the coach of coach of USC, Jim McKay, said, "That's not going to happen again." And then he dominated the series.
Yes, he did.
So he made up for it.
There have been, I'm glad you brought him up. There have been so many great coaches. We talked about athletes, and they've had a ton of athletes, but you think of coaches, John Wooden and John Madden and Bill Walsh and Pat Riley and Phil Jackson spent some time there, Pete Carroll, John Robinson, the list goes on. What is the deal in California? You've had some amazing coaches out there.
Yeah. And I think, you know, because we have more college and professional teams than any other state, obviously we have the most people and everything. So it's just that variety. Everything's on a big scale, and you have to be so competitive here to just be out there. And, you know, there's no easy games. The competition's fierce. There's a lot of it. The level's high to begin with. And I think that it attracts a lot of the elite high school, college, and pro college coaches that come along.
Well, yeah, because it isn't just at the professional level. We've seen your collegiate coaches out there. You've had just a who's who of great coaches out there as well. You think of UCLA, USC, San Diego State, Fresno State. There have been some really, really good just coaches that have come through those ranks and gone on to bigger and better things.
Exactly. And, you know, you have all the announcers that even work in California and, you know, go to New York or vice versa. So, you know, the big media markets, lots of venues, a variety of venues, diverse population. It's everything's big. So California Sports Astounding is we just tried to cover the fun and unknown type things. This is more of an easy read, a fun read to discover, you know, the unique history of California and our official state sport. Do you know what that is?
That's an excellent question. I don't know if I know what that is. What is your official state sport?
Do you want to take a guess?
If I were guessing, oh goodness. The problem is that California has excelled in so many sports. So I'm gonna go with like swimming. I'm gonna throw swimming out there because they've been good at just about everything.
Well, the California swimmers dominate at the Olympics.
Yes.
That is true. Someone like Mark Spitz,
yes,
7 Olympic gold medals. But the official state sport is surfing.
Okay. That
makes sense. Of course, introduced by the Hawaiians who came to Santa Cruz and introduced the sport. But what is second in California is skateboarding. Skateboarding is far more popular than surfing. There's far more people that do it. It costs less. It's easier. You don't have to live by the ocean. So when it came up to the governor to sign the official state sport, skateboarding had quite a bit of support. But California has excellent surfing museums that have preserved the history here. So that's the good news. And we have, like I say, the variety. My book covers over 65 sports, men's and women's. So this is all levels, high school, college, pro, the Olympics, and then the X Games were introduced in California as well.
That's right. That's right. I remember that. I remember when they were just coming out and everybody was kind of going, what is this? They were just on last weekend and I'm watching them, and they've done this really smart because they put them in that gap, like you talked about, after the NBA and NHL, before football gets going. There's nothing else. Hey, I'm going to turn this on and kind of see what happens. But we've seen some amazing athletes come out of those games.
Exactly. California hosted the first Summer X Games, and they were in San Diego. And they hosted the very first Winter X Games, and that was up at Big Bear Mountain.
Sure.
So we've covered that. And California's done a really good job of, adding to America's lore of sports and introducing a few sports on our own.
That's true. That's true, because you have a couple of sports that you guys have kind of gotten going. Of course, when you go into the X Games, those crazy athletes, they're always looking for a way to push and find new things, aren't they?
That's right. And we had Tony Hawk, the famous skateboarder, he was one of the big names in the X Games. And from there, all these other sports and events took off. So California was a real pioneer in pushing that forward. And then the rest of the nation just, caught on to that.
You're absolutely right. Here's an odd one for you. And again, I'm asking you to probably comment on something that you can't possibly, but we know for years, the Los Angeles Lakers, well, they come from Minneapolis, they come out there, the popularity, the movie series, or the series that was on HBO this year, kind of showing how they got started and how Dr. Buss got them rolling, got eventually get Pat Riley, get Magic Johnson, Kareem. They were the team, to me, that everybody in California kind of pulled for. I know now with the Golden State Warriors, they're kind of splitting that fan base, aren't they?
Yeah, they definitely got a handle on it now. They've came up with some, fantastic teams in the last 5 years. So it's definitely moved north, and it'll be interesting to see if the Lakers, which direction they go, and then can they kind of regain that and make that division. That's a tough division to be
Very.
in.
Yeah, you're right.
Winning that division, let alone advancing in the playoffs. But even before the Fabulous Forum and all that, the Lakers were battling the Boston Celtics every year in the NBA Finals. Yeah, they just didn't have quite enough firepower. And Bill Russell and the Celtics would it seemed like they would win every single year. But the Lakers, they produced so many great teams, winning that NBA record 33 games in a row.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And just an outstanding accomplishment from them. So,
well, and I know that he was painted so poorly in that series, but how good was Jerry West? We know he had a hand in both of those franchises a little bit. Jerry West, I don't know that he ever gets the recognition that he truly deserves, but what an incredible mind that guy. And not to mention his game. His game was really good, but what an incredible mind after his playing days were over. Jerry West is a little bit overlooked these days.
Yeah, definitely, because he carried the Lakers. If they have an off night, he was the one carrying the team, scoring the points, just making them inch along. And then, of course, when he was joined by Wilt Chamberlain, and then you had Elgin Baylor on the same team, and so he did a lot. And of course, after his playing days were over, very successful executive in the NBA.
I mean, they made a logo after that man, and that is well-deserved because he was that good. We talked about this. The book that you wrote has so many interesting things. We are the Daly Dose. The name Daly has some history with the NBA, doesn't it? Because Daly City actually hosted an NBA All-Star game at one point, which is just bizarre because why in the world you would have it there, I have no idea. But Daly City actually had an All-Star game for one season, didn't they?
Right. That's up in the Bay Area. They had it there, and then they had another All-Star game later on at the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena. So California has done their part. They've hosted all-star games for National Hockey League, football. We've had the Super Bowl. We've had every large event, every all-star event for every major professional sports franchise.
That is absolutely incredible too. And it's kind of weird to look back now, because we think of these, these big cities and, well, you've got to have it, in New Orleans, you've got to have it in New York. No, they had it in Daly City one year. And I think Rick Barry went crazy or something in the game. I don't know, but
well, that's, that was the old Cow Palace, and that was where
right.
teams played. I mean, they would have a basketball game, and then the next night they'd have a rodeo. So it's just, and they had a little bit of everything, so.
That's absolutely amazing.
Daly City being on the boundary of San Francisco and Daly City. So yes, it sounds exotic, but it wasn't that far from that. And the old Candlestick Park, we could talk about all the great players and teams there, and going there in the summertime in August for a day game. And if you don't have a parka and gloves with you, you're going to freeze to death.
No, you're right. You're right. Well, and even I know it ended up being dated at the time. Jack Murphy Stadium was a pretty darn nice stadium down south, wasn't it?
Well, it was. The Padres, San Diego Padres, actually started out 1936, and they had a small little stadium or park, as it were, and that was near downtown San Diego. They later moved out to Mission Valley, and they had a Westgate Park where they played games. And then finally, they ended up at San Diego Stadium. After Jack Murphy, he was the main sports writer for the San Diego Union. After he passed away, they renamed the stadium Jack Murphy Stadium. And that's where the Padres ended up playing for many years. And now we've got Petco Park downtown, which is one of Major League Baseball's finest stadiums.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Is there any hope of getting the NFL back in San Diego, or is that a done deal?
We all hope. We all hope. And here's an interesting tidbit from California Sports Astounding.
Okay.
The new stadium that San Diego State is moving into on September 3rd seats 35,000 fans. However, it is expandable to 55,000 seats, which just happens to be the bare minimum the National Football League requires to host a Super Bowl.
Could it be headed back to Southern California?
Accommodate a pro football team, and I think it may happen. We'll see, but the NFL loved having the Super Bowl in San Diego. They just loved it.
Oh, sure. How could you not?
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a beautiful city, and weather-wise, I don't know that it gets any better than what you have there in San Diego. Go there any time of the year. Doesn't matter. It's going to be beautiful. That's just how it is. Dan, we talked about it a little bit. California has produced incredible athletes, from Jackie Robinson, Bill Russell, Mark Spitz, Pete Sampras, Tiger Woods, Florence Griffith Joyner. Is there an athlete, though, that maybe we don't know? Maybe it's not a name we know, but I'll bet that you go, that's a much better athlete than people realize. And that is a name that maybe they should know. I know you touch on a number of athletes in your book that I was reading through going, this must have been an incredible athlete. This must have been just an amazing player. You touch on so many different stories. Is there an athlete out there that you're going, this is a pretty good one?
Well, well, I can pick one to start. There was a runner from the University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, and his claim to fame was being the first American to run the mile in under 4 minutes. He drove over from Berkeley. Dan Bowden went to the University of Pacific track where they had a meet, and he was the first one to break that barrier and didn't have much help along the way. So, this goes way, way back. So, back to the 60s and so, and when you think about it, when you accomplish that literally by yourself, it really says a lot about the mental and physical stamina needed It's easy when you're battling your rival and someone's right with you. But to do that and become the very first American to break that barrier, and then once that door was knocked down, then you had all these other great athletes that came along. Even Jim Ryan from Kansas came over to Berkeley one year and set a world record in the mile, and other people like that. So I thought that was kind of a cool accomplishment that's probably forgotten at this point.
You are exactly right. Dan, this book that you have written is so interesting. They sent it over to me. I couldn't put it down. I stayed up all night reading it. It is such an easy read. And it has, like we talked about, some really fun, some really interesting, some really quick stories in it. You don't have to sit there and stare at it and go, okay, I've got to figure out. No, I can go down and look and just go, wow, there's a really quick story that was so interesting. It grabbed my interest right away. You did such a phenomenal job writing this. Where can listeners go to find this book and maybe more of your work that's out there?
Okay, the book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
I also have a website, which is www.californiasportsastounding.com. And that gives all the background on the book as well.
Now, I am told that you have also written a book similar to this about the state of Hawaii. Is there any truth to this rumor? Do you have a Hawaii book out there as well?
Well, that book came out in 1999.
Okay.
And at this point, that book is out of print.
Okay.
But that was my first endeavor in trying to document and preserve all this wonderful sports history. So that was a fun little book, Hawaii being so unique with all their other sports and how they were introduced there. But right now, California is it, and I'm continuing to add new things and work on things, and hopefully make this book bigger and better than ever. And I'd love to hear from sports fans, California sports fans who are probably spread out all over the country,
Sure.
Denver included. So,
well, I know we have a ton of transplants here in Denver that definitely came from California. I've got to ask you then, what's next? Are you going to add to this book? Are you looking at other states? I mean, I'm just lobbing it out there, Colorado, because he's a sports book too, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there to you. What's next on the agenda? What do you have working on?
I think the next thing is to take this book, and now that we have a benchmark for California Sports Astounding, and then what I'd like to do is build on it. We've got 65 sports covered already. I'd like to add more. I'd like to add more special events, unique events that happened in the sports history, athlete birthdays, more at the high school level, college level. I just basically just kind of expand it because, California is working towards hosting the 2028 Summer Olympics. And we're 6 years out, but there's so much happening, coming our way. We hosted the Super Bowl last January, right?
Sure. Well, and you hosted the very first one.
Yeah, and this coming January, SoFi Stadium in Inglewood will be hosting the college football championship game, college football playoff game. So that'll be a big event as well. But yeah, there's plenty of things coming up. And what I'd like to do is really build on this. There's lots more to cover, and hopefully make a series of volumes. And one book won't do it justice, but I can certainly start a second volume. That'll keep me busy, something to do in retirement, right?
Absolutely. Well, and like you talked about, there are so many stories. There are so many events and teams. And I'm really glad that you brought up high schools. And I won't keep you much longer, I promise. But some of the high schools and the high school talent and the teams that you have out there, you talked about in the book a little bit, De La Salle, Cal Poly. There are some incredible high school teams out there, basketball, football, track, you name it. Amazing high school athletes coming out of California. Yeah.
And all those coaches that are so dedicated at the high school level to developing that talent, Cal Poly in Long Beach, not just football, but in track, they were sending several people to become, developing them, and they later became NCAA champions, Olympic medalists, and things like that. So we definitely have that. And I wanted to throw out one other tidbit.
I would love it.
Another tidbit. Okay. So we know the world's very first triathlon was held in France. Where was America's very first triathlon held? You want to take a guess?
That's an excellent question. I've got to think of what's involved in triathlons. And so I'm gonna say San Diego. I'm gonna say somewhere near the beach. We got to go somewhere like that.
You're right on the money. San Diego hosted the very first triathlon in America. So the swimming, the running, the cycling, all of that was held here. And that was a big deal because, of course, now they've developed that sport so much, but San Diego was the place. And California was also the place for the invention of the go-kart and go-kart racing. That was the invention of that. Beach volleyball was originally played in Hawaii, but California had the very first beach volleyball games in 1924.
Okay.
So you have all that.
Well, and I don't know where you categorize this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you talked about go-karts. My dad was a race car driver. You've had some really good racing and some really good drivers come out of the state of California as well. I mean, that for years, that was the hot rod capital of the world. You went to California, that is where it was all started at, and they had some phenomenal racing back there.
That's right. And the Ontario Motor Speedway,
yep.
Sonoma,
Riverside
of auto racing, and Fontana, and all these places, and all different types of racing. So you name it.
Sonoma, you're right.
Now they're racing NASCAR. They're having NASCAR races inside the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Yes. They did that for the time this year. So yeah, racing is still real big, and but the go-karts got their start in the parking lot of the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. So
that's great.
There's all kinds of little stuff that I forget. I have to look it up myself, but I love doing research. I love preserving this history for sports fans, and the sports fans are the ones that enhance it and make it better. So I'd love to hear from them and hear their perspective and hear their stories. And that's something that we can use to make the book better, add a little bit more interest to it for everybody at all levels. And like I say, we covered men's and women's sports. It wasn't just Billie Jean King, obviously, the Hall of Fame career, tennis career, but we tried to include in this book all different levels, and go from there.
Dan, you did a phenomenal job. His name is Dan Cisco. His book is called California Sports Astounding. And I'm telling you right now, it is a really, really fun read. Go get it at Amazon, because when you pick it up, you're going to have a really, really hard time putting it down. I know that I personally did. I had to keep reading to the next page and find out the next story. You did an amazing job on that book. And I want to say you did an amazing job today. Thank you so much for coming into the Daily Dose. I really enjoyed our conversation. I really appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Clint. I really appreciate it. Well, let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. And the next section that comes out, you let me know. We're going to have you come back on, because I want to read it myself. I really do appreciate you coming in today, though.
Okay, super. Thanks a lot.